que necessitam de ajuda humanitária no mundo chegará a 300 milhões de pessoas. Em tempos de crescente polarização, expressões como desglobalização se tornaram corriqueiras. Mas é impossível desplanetizar nossa vida em comum. Estamos condenados à interdependência da mudança climática. O planeta já não espera para cobrar da próxima geração e está farto de acordos climáticos que não são cumpridos. Está cansado de metas de redução de emissão de carbono negligenciadas do auxílio financeiro aos países pobres que nunca chega. O negacionismo sucumbe ante as evidências do aquecimento global. 2024 caminha para ser o ano mais quente da história moderna. Furacões no Caribe, tufões na Ásia, seca e inundações na África e chuvas torrenciais na Europa deixam um rastro de morte e de destruição. No sul do Brasil, tivemos a maior enchente desde 1941. A Amazônia está atravessando a pior estiagem em 45 anos. Incêndios florestais se alastraram pelo país e já devoraram 5 milhões de hectares apenas no mês de agosto. O meu governo não terceiriza a responsabilidade e nem abdica da sua soberania. Já fizemos muito, mas sabemos que é preciso fazer muito mais. Além de enfrentar os desafios da crise climática, lutamos contra quem lucra com a degradação ambiental. Não transigiremos com litígios ambientais, com o garimpo ilegal e com o crime organizado. Reduzimos o desmatamento na Amazônia em 50% no último ano e vamos erradicá-lo até 2030. Não é mais admissível pensar em soluções para florestas tropicais sem ouvir os povos indígenas, comunidades tradicionais e todos aqueles que vivem nelas. Nossa visão de desenvolvimento sustentável está alicerçada no potencial da bioeconomia. O Brasil sediará a COP30 em 2025, de que o multilateralismo é o único caminho para superar a urgência climática. Nossa contribuição nacionalmente determinada, o NDC, será apresentada ainda este ano, em linha com o objetivo de limitar o aumento da temperatura do planeta a 1,5 grau. O Brasil desponta como celeiro de oportunidade neste mundo revolucionado pela transição energética. Somos hoje um dos países com a matriz energética mais limpa do mundo. 90% da nossa eletricidade provém de fontes renováveis, como a biomassa, a hidrelétrica, a solar e a eólica. Fizemos opção pelos biocombustíveis há 50 anos, muito antes que a discussão sobre energias alternativas ganhasse tração. Estamos na vanguarda em outros nichos importantes, como o da produção do hidrogênio verde. É hora de enfrentar o debate sobre o ritmo lento da descarbonização do planeta e trabalhar por uma economia menos dependente de combustíveis fósseis. Senhor Presidente, na América Latina vive-se desde 2014, uma segunda década perdida. O crescimento médio da região nesse período foi de apenas 0,9%, metade do verificado na década perdida de 1990. Essa combinação de baixo crescimento e altos níveis de desigualdade resulta em efeitos nefastos sobre a paisagem política. Tragada por disputas muitas vezes alheias à região, nossa vocação de cooperação e entendimento se fragiliza. É injustificável manter Cuba em uma lista unilateral de estados que supostamente promovem terrorismo e impor medidas coercitivas unilaterais que penalizam indevidamente as populações mais vulneráveis. No Haiti, é inadiável conjugar ações para restaurar a ordem pública e promover o desenvolvimento. No Brasil, a defesa da democracia implica ação permanente anti-investidas extremistas, messiânicas e totalitárias que espalham o ódio, a intolerância e o ressentimento. Brasileiras e brasileiros continuarão a derrotar os que tentam solapar as instituições and tyrants who tried to undermine institutions and put them at the service of reactionary interests. Democracy needs to respond to the legitimate aspiration of those who no longer accept hunger, inequality, unemployment, and violence. In a globalized world, it makes no sense to resort to false patriots and isolationists, nor is there hope in resorting to ultra-liberal experiments that only worsen the difficulties of an impoverished continent. The future of our region
passa, sobretudo,
depends, above
por
all,
construir
on
Estado
building a
sustentável,
sustainable,
eficiente,
efficient,
inclusivo
and
e
inclusive
que
state
enfrente todas
that
as formas
tackles
de
all forms of
discriminação,
discrimination.
que não se intimida ante indivíduos,
A future which is
corporação
not
ou
intimidated
plataformas
by
digitais
individuals,
que se
corporations, or
julgam
digital
acima da
platforms
lei.
that consider
A
themselves above
liberdade
the law.
é a primeira
Freedom is
vítima
the first
de mundo
victim
sem
of a
regras.
world with no rules.
Elementos essenciais da
Essential
soberania
elements of
incluem o direito de
sovereignty
legislar, julgar
includes
disputas e
the
fazer
right to
cumprir as
prescribe
regras
laws,
dentro de seu
adjudicate
território,
disputes, and
incluindo
enforce
o
rules
ambiente digital.
within one's territory,
Estado que
including the
estamos
digital
construindo
environment. The
é
state we are
sensível
building is
às
sensitive to
necessidades
the
dos mais
needs of the most
vulneráveis,
vulnerable
sem abdicar
without
de
giving up
fundamentos
sound
macroeconômicos
macroeconomic
sadios.
foundations.
A falsa
The false
oposição
opposition
entre o
between
Estado e
state and
mercado
market
foi abandonada
was
pelas
abandoned
nações
by
desenvolvidas
developed
que voltaram a
nations
praticar
which returned
políticas
to
industriais
practice
ativas e fortes
active
e
industrial
forte
policies
regulação
and strong
da
regulation
economia
of the
doméstica.
domestic economy.
Na área da negligência,
In
da
the area of
inteligência
artificial
artificial,
intelligence,
vivenciamos a
we are
consolidação
experiencing
de
the
assimetrias que
consolidation of
levam
the
ao
asymmetries that
verdadeiro
lead to a
oligopólio
true
do
knowledge
saber. Avança a
oligopoly.
concentração
The
sem precedentes
unprecedented
na mão de pequeno
concentration in the
número
hands
de
of a small
pessoas
number
e
of
de
people and
empresas
companies
sediadas em número ainda
based
menor de
in an
países.
even smaller number of
Interessa-nos
countries is
uma
advancing.
inteligência
We are
artificial
interested in an
emancipadora, que também tem
emancipatory
a cara do
artificial
sul
intelligence,
global
which
e que
also has the face
fortaleça a
of the global
diversidade
south
cultural,
and which
que
strengthens
respeita os
cultural
direitos
diversity,
humanos,
that
proteja
respects
dados
human
pessoais
rights,
e
protects
promova a
personal data, and
integridade
promotes
da
information
informação. E,
integrity.
sobretudo,
And,
que
above
seja
all,
ferramenta
that it will
para
be
a
a
paz,
tool for
não para a
peace,
guerra.
not for war.
Necessitamos de uma governança
We need an
intergovernamental da
intergovernment governance
inteligência
of the
artificial,
artificial
em que
intelligence,
todos os
in which
estados
all
tenham
states
acesso.
have a seat.
Senhor presidente,
Mr. President,
as condições para acesso a
conditions for
recursos financeiros
accessing financial
seguem
resources
proibitivas para a
remain
maioria dos países de
prohibitive
renda baixa
for
e
most
média.
low and
O
middle income
fardo da
countries.
dívida limita o
The
espaço
debt
fiscal
burden limits
para
fiscal
investir em
room
saúde
to
e
invest in
educação,
health and
reduzir
education,
as desigualdades
reduce
e
inequalities,
enfrentar a
and
mudança do
address
clima.
climate change.
Países da
African
África tomam
countries
empréstimo a
borrow
taxas
at
até
rates
8
up
vezes
to 8
maiores
times
que a
higher
Alemanha
than Germany
e 4
and
vezes
4
maior do que
times
os
higher
Estados
than the
Unidos.
United States.
É plano Marshall
It's a
às
Marshall
avessas,
Plan in
em que os
reverse,
mais pobres
in which the
financiam
poorest
os mais
finance
ricos.
the richest.
Sem maior
Without
participação
greater
dos países em
participation
desenvolvimento
of the
na
developing
direção
countries
do FMI
in the
e do
management
Banco
of the
Mundial,
IMF and the World
não
Bank, there
haverá
will be no
mudança
effective
efetiva.
change.
Enquanto os objetivos
While
do
the Sustainable
desenvolvimento
Development
sustentável
Goals
ficam para trás,
lag
as
behind,
150
the
maiores
world's
empresas do mundo
150
obtiveram
largest
juntas
companies
um
had
lucro de
collectively made
trilhão
up
e
to
800
$1
bilhões de dólares nos
trillion
últimos 2 anos.
in profits over
A
the last
fortuna
2
dos 5
years. The
principais
fortunes of the
bilionários
top
mais
5
que dobrou
billionaires
desde o
have
início
more than
dessa década,
doubled since the
ao
start of
passo
this decade,
que
while
60% da
60% of
humanidade
humanity
ficou
has
mais
become
pobre.
poor.
Os super ricos
The super
pagam
rich pay
proporcionalmente
proportionally
muito menos
much
impostos
less
do que a
tax
classe
than the
trabalhadora.
working class.
Para corrigir
To
essa
remedy
anomalia,
this
o Brasil
anomaly,
tem insistido
Brazil
na
has
cooperação
insisted on
internacional
international
para
cooperation to
desenvolver
develop
padrões mínimos de
minimum
tributação
global
global.
taxation
Os
standards.
dados divulgados há 2
The
meses
data
pela
released
FAO
by
sobre o
FAO 2
estado
months
da
ago on
insegurança
the state
alimentar
of
no
food
mundo
insecurity in the
são
world is
estarrecedores.
shocking.
O número de
The number
pessoas
of people
passando
going
fome ao redor do
hungry
planeta
around the world
aumentou em
has
mais de
increased by more than
152 milhões
152
desde
million since
2019.
2019.
Isso significa
This
que
means
9%
that
da
9%
população
of the
mundial,
world's population, 733 million people, are
estão subnutridas.
undernourished.
O problema é
The
especialmente
problem
grave
is
na África
severely
e na
severe in
Ásia,
Africa
mas ele
and
também
Asia, but it
persiste
also
em partes
persists
da
in
América
parts of
Latina.
Latin America.
Mulheres e
Women
meninas
and
são as
girls
maiores,
make up the majority
são as vítimas maiores da pessoa em
of
situação de
people
fome.
facing hunger in the world.
Pandemias,
Pandemics,
conflitos
armed
armados,
conflicts,
eventos
climate
climáticos e
events,
subsídios
and
agrícolas
agricultural
dos países
subsidies from
ricos
rich countries
ampliam
are
o alcance
increasing the
desse
scope
flagelo.
of this scourge.
Mas a fome
But
não
hunger
é resultado
is not
apenas de
just the
fatores
result of
externos.
external factors.
Ela decorre,
It arises
sobretudo,
above
de
all
escolhas
from
políticas.
political
Hoje,
choices.
o
Today,
mundo produz
the world
alimento mais
produces
do que
more than enough
suficiente para
food to
erradicar.
eradicate
O
it.
que falta
What is
é criar
missing is
condições
for
de acesso
conditions
aos
to be
alimentos.
created so that food may
Esse
be
é o
affordable.
compromisso mais
This is
urgente
my
do meu
government's
governo.
most urgent
Acabar com
commitment.
a fome no
End
Brasil,
hunger in
como
Brazil,
fizemos em
as we did in
2014.
2014.
Só em
In
2023,
23
retiramos
alone,
24
we
milhões e
lifted
400
24
mil
million and
pessoas da
400,000
condição
people
de
out of a
insegurança
condition of
alimentar
severe
severa.
food insecurity.
Aliança
The
Global
Global
contra a
Alliance
fome e a
Against Hunger
pobreza,
and
que
Poverty, which
lançaremos
we
no
will
Rio
launch
de
in Rio
Janeiro,
de
em
Janeiro in
novembro, nasce
November,
dessa vontade
was born
política
from this
e
political
desse
will
espírito de
and this spirit of
solidariedade. Ela será
solidarity.
dos
It will be
principais
one of the main
resultados da
results
presidência
of the
brasileira do
Brazilian
G20 e
G20
está
chairmanship
aberta
and
a
is
todos
open
os
to the
países do
world.
mundo. Todos os que queiram se
Anyone who
somar a
wants
esse
to join
esforço
this
coletivo
collective effort
serão muito
is
bem-vindos.
welcome.
Senhor Presidente,
Mr. President,
senhoras
ladies
e
and
senhores,
gentlemen,
prestes a completar
about to turn
80 anos,
80,
a
the
Carta
United
das
Nations
Nações
Charter
Unidas nunca
has
passou
never
por uma reforma
undergone
urgente.
comprehensive reform.
Apenas
Only
4 emendas foram
4
aprovadas,
amendments
todas
were
elas
passed,
entre
all of them
1965
between
e
1965 and 1973.
A versão atual
The
da Carta
Charter's
não
current
trata de
version
alguns dos
fails
desafios
to address
mais
some of
prementes
humanity's
da
most
humanidade.
pressing
Na
challenges.
fundação da ONU,
When the UN was
éramos
founded, we
51
were
países.
51 countries.
Hoje,
We are
somos
now
193.
193
Várias
countries.
nações,
Several
principalmente no
countries,
continente
mainly on the
africano,
African continent,
estavam sob domínio
were under
colonial e
colonial
não tiveram
rule
voz sobre
when the
seus
UN was
objetivos
founded and
e
had no
funcionamento.
say over its
E
goals
não
and functioning.
existe equilíbrio
There
de
is
gênero no
no
exercício
gender balance
das
in the
mais
highest
altas
positions.
funções. O cargo
The
de
position of
secretário-geral
Secretary-General
jamais
has never
foi
been
ocupado
held
por
by
uma
a
mulher.
woman.
Estamos chegando
We are approaching
ao final do
the
primeiro
end
quarto
of
do
the
século
first quarter of the
XXI,
21st
com as
century,
Nações
with the
Unidas cada
United
vez mais
Nations increasingly
esvaziadas
empty
e
and
paralisadas.
paralyzed.
É hora de
It
reagir
is time to
com vigor
react
a essa
vigorously
situação,
to this situation,
restituindo à
restoring to the
organização
organization
as
the
prerrogativas que
prerogatives
decorrem
that
da
derive
sua
from its
condição
status as a
de fórum
universal
universal.
forum.
Não bastam ajustes
One-off
pontuais.
adjustments are not enough.
Precisamos
We need
contemplar
to
uma
think about
ampla revisão da Carta.
review and revising
Sua
the Charter
reforma deve
comprehensively. The
compreender
reform should
os
include
seguintes
the following goals.
A transformação do Conselho
Transforming the
Econômico
Economic
e
and
Social
Social Council
no principal
into the
fórum
main
para o
forum
tratamento
for
do
dealing with
desenvolvimento
sustainable
sustentável
development
e do combate à
and the
mudança
fight against
climática
climate
com
change
capacidade
with a real
real de
capacity
inspirar
to
as
inspire
instituições
financial
financeiras.
institutions.
A revitalização do papel
Revitalizing
da
the role
Assembleia
of the
Geral,
General Assembly,
inclusive em temas de
including
paz e
in matters
segurança
of international
internacionais.
peace and
O
security,
fortalecimento
strengthening
da
of
Comissão de
the
Consolidação da
Peace-Building
Paz.
Commission,
A reforma do Conselho de
reform of the
Segurança
Security Council,
com foco em sua
focusing on
composição,
its composition,
método de
working
trabalho,
methods, and
direito de
veto
veto,
powers
de modo a
in order to
torná-la
make it
mais
more
eficaz e
effective and
representativa das
representative
realidades
of
contemporâneas.
contemporary
A
realities.
exclusão da
Excluding
América
Latin
Latina e da África de
America
assentos
and Africa from
permanentes
the
no
permanent
Conselho de
seats of the
Segurança é
Security
eco
Council is
inaceitável
an
de práticas
unacceptable
de
echo of
dominação
domination
do passado
practices from the
colonial.
colonial
Vamos
past.
promover essa discussão
have-
de forma transparente.
Let's promote this discussion in a transparent way.
Vamos promover essa
Let's
discussão de
promote
forma
this
transparente,
discussion in a
em
transparent
consulta no
way,
G77,
in
no
consultation with the
G20, nos
G77,
BRICS,
the
na
G20, the
CELAC,
BRICS,
no CARICOM
in
e
the
tantos
CARICOM,
outros
at
espaços
the
que
UE,
existem
and any
para
other
discutir.
spaces that exist.
Não tem ilusões
I
sobre a
have no illusions
complexidade de
about
uma
the
reforma
complexity
como
of a
essa,
reform
que
like
enfrentará
this,
interesses
which will face
cristalizados de
crystallized interest
manutenção do status
in
quo.
maintaining the status quo.
Exigirá
It will
enorme esforço
require
de
enormous
negociação,
negotiation
mas essa
effort.
é a nossa
But that is our
responsabilidade.
responsibility.
Não podemos
We
esperar
cannot wait
por outra
for
tragédia
another
mundial,
world
como a
tragedy
Segunda
like
Grande
the
Guerra,
World
para
War
só
II
então
to
construir
only
sobre
then
seus
build
escombros
a
uma
new
nova
governance
governança
on its
global.
rubbles.
A vontade da
The
maioria
will
pode
of the majority
persuadir
can
os que
persuade
se apegam às
those
expressões
who
cruas
cling
dos
to the
mecanismos
raw
de poder.
expression of the
Neste
mechanisms of
plenário,
power.
ecoam as aspirações
The
de toda a
humanities
humanidade.
aspirations equal in
Aqui,
this plenary.
travamos os
Here,
grandes debates do mundo.
engage in the world's
Neste
big
fórum,
debates. In this
buscamos
forum,
as
we
respostas
look for
para os
answers
problemas
to
que
the
afligem o
problems
planeta.
inflicted on the
Recai
world.
sobre a Assembleia Geral,
It is up
expressão
to the
maior
General
do
Assembly, the
multilateralismo.
biggest expression of
A missão de
multilateralism, the mission
pavimentar
to pave
o
the way
caminho
for
para
the
o futuro.
future.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you
e boa
very
sorte.
much.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Federative Republic of Brazil, so they're checking a few things before he's here. But I think they're checking a few things. I don't know. Just driving another minute. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Joseph R. Biden, Jr., President of the United States of America. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
My fellow leaders, today is the fourth time I've had the great honor of speaking to this assembly as President of the United States. It'll be my last. I've seen a remarkable sweep of history. I was first elected to office in the United States of America as a U.S. Senator in 1972. Now, I know I look like I'm only 40. I know that. I was 29 years old. Back then, we were living through an inflection point, a moment of tension and uncertainty. The world was divided by the Cold War. The Middle East was headed toward war. America was at war in Vietnam. At that point, the longest war in America's history. Our country was divided and angry, and there were questions about our staying power and our future. But even then, I entered public life not out of despair, but out of optimism. The United States and the world got through that moment. It wasn't easy or simple or without significant setbacks. But we go on to reduce the threat of nuclear weapons through arms control, and then go on to bring the Cold War itself to an end. Israel and Egypt went to war, but then forged a historic peace. We ended the war in Vietnam. The last year in Hanoi, I met with the Vietnamese leadership. We elevated our partnership to the highest level. It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the capacity for reconciliation. That today, the United States and Vietnam are partners and friends. And it's proof that even from the horrors of war, there's a way forward. Things can get better. We should never forget that. I've seen that throughout my career. In the 1980s, I spoke out against apartheid in South Africa. And then I watched the racist regime fall. In the 1990s, I worked to hold Milosevic accountable for war crimes. He was held accountable. At home, I wrote and passed the Violence Against Women Act to end the scourge of violence against women and girls, not only in America, but across the world, as many of you have as well. But we have so much more to do, especially against rape and sexual violence as weapons of war and terror. We were attacked on 9/11 by al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. We brought him justice. Then I came to the presidency at another moment of crisis and uncertainty. I believed America had to look forward. New challenges, new threats, new opportunities were in front of us. We needed to put ourselves in a position to see the threats, to deal with the challenges, and to seize the opportunities as well. We need to end the era of war that began on 9/11. As Vice President to President Obama, he asked me to work to wind down the military operations in Iraq, and we did, painful as it was. When I came to office as president, Afghanistan had replaced Vietnam as America's longest war. I was determined to end it, and I did. It was a hard decision, but the right decision. 4 American presidents had faced that decision, but I was determined not to leave it to the 5th. It was a decision accompanied by tragedy. 13 brave Americans lost their lives, along with hundreds of Afghans in a suicide bomb. I think those lost lives, I think them every day. I think of all the 2,461 U.S. military deaths over a long 20 years of that war. 20,744 American servicemen wounded in action. I think of their service, their sacrifice, and their heroism. I know other countries lost their own men and women fighting alongside us. We honor their sacrifices as well. To face the future, I was also determined to rebuild my country's alliances and partnerships to a level not previously seen. We did just that, from traditional treaty alliances to new partnerships like the Quad with the United States, Japan, Australia, and India. I know many look at the world today and see difficulties and react with despair, but I do not. I won't. As leaders, we don't have the luxury. I recognize the challenges from Ukraine to Gaza to Sudan and beyond. War, hunger, terrorism, brutality, record displacement of people, a climate crisis, democracy at risk, strains within our societies, the promise of artificial intelligence and its significant risk. The list goes on. But maybe because all I've seen and all we have done together over the decades, I have hope. I know there is a way forward. In 1919, the Irish poet William Butler Yeats described a world, and I quote, "where things fall apart, the center cannot hold, mere anarchy is loosed upon the world," end of quote. Some may say those words describe the world not just in 1919, but in 2024. But I see a critical distinction. In our time, the center has held. Leaders and people from every region and across the political spectrum have stood together, turned the page. We turned the page on the worst pandemic in a century. We made sure COVID no longer controls our lives. We defended the UN Charter and ensured the survival of Ukraine as a free nation. My country made the largest investment in climate, clean energy, ever anywhere in history. There will always be forces that pull our countries apart and the world apart. Aggression, extremism, chaos, and cynicism. A desire to retreat from the world and go it alone. Our task, our test, is to make sure that the forces holding us together are stronger than those who are pulling us apart. That the principles of partnership that we came here each year to uphold can withstand the challenges. That the center holds once again. My fellow leaders, I truly believe we're at another inflection point in world history. For the choices we make today will determine our future for decades to come. Will we stand behind the principles that unite us? Will we stand firm against aggression? Will we end the conflicts that are raging today? Will we take on global challenges like climate change, hunger, and disease? Will we plan now for the opportunities and risk of a revolutionary new technologies? I want to talk today about each of these decisions and the actions, in my view, we must take. To start, each of us in this body has made a commitment to the principles of the UN Charter to stand up against aggression. When Russia invaded Ukraine, we could have stood by and merely protested. But Vice President Harris and I understood that that was an assault on everything this institution was supposed to stand for. And so, my direction, America stepped into the breach, providing massive security and economic and humanitarian assistance. Our NATO allies and partners in 50-plus nations stood up as well. But most importantly, the Ukrainian people stood up. I asked the people of this chamber to stand up for them. The good news is Putin's war has failed and at his core aim. He set out to destroy Ukraine, but Ukraine is still free. He set out to weaken NATO, but NATO is bigger, stronger, and more united than ever before, with 2 new members, Finland and Sweden. But we cannot let up. The world now has another choice to make. Will we sustain our support to help Ukraine win this war and preserve its freedom, or walk away and let aggression be renewed and a nation be destroyed? I know my answer. We cannot grow weary. We cannot look away. And we will not let up on our support for Ukraine, not until Ukraine wins a just and durable peace in the UN Charter. We also need to uphold our principles as we seek to responsibly manage the competition with China so it does not veer into conflict. We stand ready to cooperate on urgent challenges for the good of our people and the people everywhere. We recently resumed cooperation with China to stop the flow of deadly synthetic narcotics. I appreciate the collaboration. It matters for the people of my country and many others around the world. On matters of conviction, the United States is unabashed, pushing back against unfair economic competition, against military coercion of other nations in the South China Sea, and maintaining peace and stability across the Taiwan Straits, and protecting our most advanced technologies so they cannot be used against us or any of our partners. At the same time, we're going to continue to strengthen our network of alliances and partnerships across the Indo-Pacific. These partnerships are not against any nation. They're building blocks for a free, open, secure, and peaceful Indo-Pacific. We're also working to bring greater measure of peace and stability to the Middle East. The world must not flinch from the horrors of October 7th. Any country would have the right and responsibility to ensure that such an attack can never happen again. Thousands of armed Hamas terrorists invaded a sovereign state, slaughtering and massacring more than 1,200 people, including 46 Americans, in their homes and at a music festival. Despicable acts of sexual violence, 250 innocents taken hostage, endorsed by the UN Security Council. Now is the time for the parties to finalize its terms, bring the hostages home, ensure security for Israel and Gaza free of Hamas grip, ease the suffering in Gaza, and end this war. On October 7th, since October 7th, we've also been determined to prevent a wider war that engulfs the entire region. Hezbollah, unprovoked, joined the October 7th attack, launching rockets into Israel. Almost a year later, too many on each side of the Israeli-Lebanon border remain displaced. Full-scale war is not in anyone's interest. Even if the situation has escalated, a diplomatic solution is still possible. In fact, it remains the only path to lasting security to allow the residents from both countries to return to their homes and the border safely. And that's what we're working tirelessly to achieve. As we look ahead, we must also address the rise of violence against innocent Palestinians on the West Bank and set the conditions for a better future, including a two-state solution where the world, where Israel enjoys security and peace and full recognition and normalized relations with all its neighbors, where Palestinians live in security, dignity, and self-determination in a state of their own. Progress toward peace will put us in a stronger position to deal with the ongoing threat posed by Iran. Together we must deny oxygen to its terrorist proxies, which have called for more October 7th and ensure that Iran will never, ever obtain a nuclear weapon. Gaza is not the only conflict that deserves our outrage. In Sudan, a bloody civil war unleashed one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. 8 million on the brink of famine. Hundreds of thousands already there. Atrocities in Darfur and elsewhere. The United States has led the world in providing humanitarian aid to Sudan. And with our partners, we've led diplomatic talks to try to silence the guns and avert a wider famine. The world needs to stop arming the generals, to speak with one voice and tell them, stop tearing your country apart, stop blocking aid to the Sudanese people, end this war now. But people need more than the absence of war. They need a chance to live in dignity. They need to be protected from the ravages of climate change, hunger, and disease. Our administration has invested over $150 billion to make progress and other sustainable development goals. It includes $20 billion for food security, and over $50 billion for global health. We've mobilized billions more in private sector investment. We've taken the most ambitious climate action in history. We've moved to rejoin the Paris Agreement on day one. And today, my country is finally on track to cut emissions in half by 2030. On track to honor my pledge to quadruple climate financing to developing nations with $11 billion thus far this year. We've rejoined the World Health Organization, donating nearly 700 million doses of COVID vaccine to 117 countries. We must now move quickly to face Mpox outbreak in Africa. We're prepared to commit $500 million to help African countries prevent and respond to Mpox and to donate 1 million doses of Mpox vaccine now. We call on our partners to match our pledge and make this a billion-dollar commitment to the people of Africa. Beyond the core necessities of food and health, the United States, the G7, and our partners have embarked on an ambitious initiative to mobilize and deliver significant finance to the developing world. We're working to help countries build out their infrastructure, to clean energy transition, to their digital transformation, to lay new economic foundations for a prosperous future. It's called the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment. We've already started to see the fruits of this emerge in Southern Africa and Southeast Asia and in the Americas. We have to keep it going. I want to get things done together. In order to do that, we must build a stronger, more effective, and more inclusive United Nations. The UN needs to adapt and bring new voices and new perspectives. That's why we support reforming and expanding the membership of the UN Security Council. My UN ambassador just laid out our detailed vision to reflect today's world, not yesterday's. It's time to move forward. The Security Council, like the UN itself, needs to go back to the job of making peace, of brokering deals to end wars and suffering. And to stop the spread of the most dangerous weapons, of stabilizing troubled regions in East Africa, from East Africa to Haiti, to Kenya-led mission that's working alongside the Haitian people to turn the tide. We also have a responsibility to prepare our citizens for the future. We'll see more technological change, I argue, in the next 2 to 10 years than we have in the last 50 years. Artificial intelligence is going to change our ways of life, our ways of work, and our ways of war. It could usher in scientific progress at a pace never seen before, and much of it could make our lives better. But AI also brings profound risks, from deep fakes to disinformation, to novel pathogens, to bioweapons. We've worked at home and abroad to define the new norms and standards. This year, we achieved the first ever General Assembly resolution on AI to start developing global rules of the road. We also announced a declaration on the responsible use of AI, joined by 60 countries in this chamber. But let's be honest, this is just the tip of the iceberg, what we need to do to manage this new technology. Nothing is certain about how AI will evolve or how it will be deployed. No one knows all the answers. My fellow leaders, it's with humility I offer 2 questions. First, how do we as an international community govern AI? As countries and companies race to uncertain frontiers, we need an equally urgent effort to ensure AI's safety, security, and trustworthiness. As AI grows more powerful, it also must grow more responsive to our collective needs and values. Benefits of all must be shared equitably. It should be harnessed to narrow, not deepen, digital divides. Second, will we ensure that AI supports rather than undermines the core principles that human life has value and all humans deserve dignity? We must make certain that the awesome capabilities of AI will be used to uplift and empower everyday people. not to give dictators more powerful shackles on the human spirit. In the years ahead, there may well be no greater test of our leadership than how we deal with AI. Let me close with this. Even as we navigate so much change, one thing must not change. We must never forget who we're here to represent. We, the people. These are the first words of our Constitution, the very idea of America. They inspired the opening words of the UN Charter. I made the preservation of democracy the central cause of my presidency. This summer, I faced a decision whether to seek a second term as president. It was a difficult decision. Being president has been the honor of my life. There's so much more I want to get done. As much as I love the job, I love my country more. I decided after 50 years of public service, it's time for a new generation of leadership to take my nation forward. My fellow leaders, let us never forget, some things are more important than staying in power. It's your people. It's your people that matter the most. Never forget, we are here to serve the people, not the other way around. Because the future will be won by those who unleash the full potential of their people, to breathe free, to think freely, to innovate, to educate, to live and love openly without fear. That's the soul of democracy. It does not belong to any one country. I've seen it all around the world in the brave men and women who ended apartheid, brought down the Berlin Wall, fight today for freedom and justice and dignity. We saw it, that universal yearning for rights and freedom in Venezuela, where millions cast their vote for change that hadn't been recognized. But it can't be denied. The world knows the truth. We saw it in Uganda, LGBT activists demanding safety and recognition of their common humanity. We see it in citizens across the world peacefully choosing their future. From Ghana to India to South Korea, nations representing 1/4 of humanity who will hold elections this year alone. It's remarkable, the power of we the people, that makes me more optimistic about the future than I've ever been. Since I was first elected to the United States Senate in 1972, every age faces its challenges. I saw it as a young man. I see it today. But we are stronger than we think. We're stronger together than alone. And what the people call impossible is just an illusion. Nelson Mandela taught us, and I quote, "It always seems impossible until it's done. It always seems impossible until it's done." My fellow leaders, there's nothing that's beyond our capacity if we work together. Let's work together. God bless you all, and may God protect all those who seek peace. Thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the United States of America. May I request representatives to remain seated while we suspend the meeting for 5 minutes before resuming to hear the next speaker.